I just want to welcome everybody who is joining. Quiero darle la bienvenida a todos que están con nosotros esta tarde. I'm going to speak bilingually at first, and then I'm going to pass it on to our interpretation crew that is going to help us all get connected logistically. Estoy hablando en español e inglés al principio y luego nos conectamos con nuestro equipo de interpretación que nos va a apoyar para que tengamos una buena comunicación. And I just want to say welcome to the 20th episode in this webinar series hosted by Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, a series called Power Not Paranoia. Quiero darles la bienvenida a esta serie. Este es el episodio 20 dentro de este tiempo de pandemia y de lucha. Y es una serie que se llama Poder, no Paranoia. Y hoy también estamos junto a la organización FAMILIA Trans Queer Liberation Movement, Movimiento de Liberación Trans y Queer, que también somos anfitriones de esta reunión. Y especialmente le estamos dando la bienvenida a la Red Comunitaria Trans desde Bogotá, Colombia. And at today's episode, we're co-hosting with Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement, and we have the honor to host the Trans Community Network all the way from Bogotá, Colombia. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to our interpretation team, who's gonna guide us, and then we'll come back right here. Voy a pasársela a nuestro equipo de interpretación ahora, que nos va a guiar, y después de eso podemos hablar ya en un lenguaje lo que gusten. Ahí les va. Here we go.
Hola hi everyone, hola todos. My name is Alejandra, and today with me is also José Eduardo, we will be your interpreters for today.
Hi everyone, hola a todos. Mi nombre es Alejandra y conmigo el día de hoy también tenemos a José Eduardo. Seremos sus intérpretes este día.
So just a note about how to access the interpretation. Once the interpretation is activated, it's not quite activated right now, but you will see a globe. And so you will click on the globe, and from there you will go to a menu that gives you English, Spanish options. So you would choose the language that you want to listen to this conversation in.
Una notica sobre cómo acceder a la interpretación. Aún no se enciende la interpretación, pero cuando se encienda van a ver la opción de un globo terráqueo que va a decir interpretación. Van a hacer clic en ese globo terráqueo y van a ver un menú donde van a escoger el idioma en el que les gustaría escuchar durante esta reunión.
You will also have the option of muting the original audio.
También tendrán la opción de poner en silencio el audio original.
We usually recommend that folks don't, so that you can have a sense and context of sort of like what the speaker, the tone of the speaker.
Usualmente les recomendamos que no lo apaguen para que tengan un sentido del tono y de cómo está hablando el orador o la presentadora original.
And so, so what happens is that you will listen in at around 20% of the original speaker, and the interpreter's voice will be heard at around 80% or so.
Y lo que ocurre cuando se hace eso es que van a estar escuchando aproximadamente al 20% de la voz, el sonido original, y van a escuchar la voz del intérprete aproximadamente a 80% del volumen.
There are sometimes hiccups where both the presenter or speaker and the interpreter is heard at the same volume. So if that is your experience, we recommend to mute the original audio.
A veces hay problemitas donde se va a escuchar la voz del intérprete a la vez que del presentador o de la persona que es del orador. Si eso ocurre, les recomendamos que en ese entonces sí apaguen el sonido, el audio original.
If you are joining us from a smartphone, the way to find the interpretation once it is activated is you'll see 3 dots on your screen, and so you'll click on that, which will take you to the selection of languages, English, Spanish, and also the option of muting the original audio.
Si se están uniendo de un teléfono celular inteligente, pueden ir a los 3 puntitos que están abajo de su pantalla. Ahí van a acceder al menú con las opciones de idioma y también van a tener la opción de poner en silencio el audio original.
And so once you've selected the language, just make sure to click on done so that it is activated.
Ya que hayan escogido el idioma, asegúrense que presionen, que hagan clic en done o completo para que se tome en cuenta su selección.
And so that is how you will access the interpretation. Now we're going to move on to some cues about how to co-create this multilingual space.
Y así es como se va a acceder a la interpretación. Ahora vamos a seguir con algunas pautas en cómo se va a estar creando ese espacio bilingüe.
So we ask that only one person speak at a time, so only one voice.
Les pedimos que solamente una persona hable a la vez, entonces solamente una voz.
If you see us as interpreters go on camera and do this, we ask that this means that we're asking speakers to take a breath and maybe speak at a pace in which we can keep up.
Si nos ven como intérpretes encender nuestra cámara y hacer esta señal, esto significa que les estamos pidiendo a los presentadores u oradores que tomen una respiración y hablen en una velocidad un poquito más despacio para que les podamos interpretar.
And so if you see us do that, it's sometimes hard to get the speaker's attention. So we ask that you do it with us.
Entonces, si nos ven haciendo eso, hay veces que es difícil llamar la atención de la persona hablando, entonces les pedimos a los demás que también hagan esa señal con nosotros.
And then the other thing is if the speaker is speaking too low, we'll go like this, which means to raise your voice a little bit.
También la otra cosita, si es que la persona hablando está hablando muy bajito, vamos a hacer esta señal. Eso significa que si pueden hablar un poquito más fuerte.
And then the last thing is if you are having trouble accessing the interpretation, don't suffer in silence. Please make sure to reach out to either myself, José Eduardo, or any of the co-hosts.
Y por último, no sufran en silencio. Si están teniendo cualquier problema accediendo a la interpretación, por favor, mándale un mensaje a mí, a José Eduardo o a cualquiera de los otros coanfitriones de la reunión.
Y con eso, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then it'll take a couple of minutes to enable the interpretation.
Con eso voy a dejar de compartir mi pantalla y va a tomar unos momentitos para encender la interpretación.
Y Ale nos deja saber cuándo podemos. ¿Ya está? Ok,
Let us know when. Okay, great. It's on. Great.
Quiero darles la
All right.
bienvenida
So I'm gonna
nuevamente.
welcome y'all
Muchísimas gracias
once
por venir
again,
aquí
and thank
entonces,
you to the
bienvenidos
interpretation
a
team that's helping us
Red Comunitaria
connect and be able
Trans.
to communicate with each
Mi
other.
nombre es Mariela
My name is
Saba,
Mariela
estaré
Saba,
aquí apoyando la
and I'm going to
conversación.
be
Más
here
adelante
supporting the
estaremos
conversation. More than
compartiendo
anything, hold the space so that we can
nuestros
listen to each
amigos,
other and we can listen to our,
nuestros guests,
how do you
nuestros
say,
invitados
guests, our
desde
guests,
Bogotá,
um,
Colombia.
all the way from Bogotá, Colombia, the
Es un honor que estemos en
Trans
comunicación
Community
con
Network.
ustedes.
It's an honor to be
Vamos
in
a escuchar su
conversation with you all.
presentación
We're going to hear a
después de
presentation
esto
from
vamos a
them
hacer una
first. After
sesión
that, our organization,
afrodescentrado policiaco, los abolish,
Stop
y también de
LAPD
nuestro
Spying
coordinador
Coalition,
FAMILIA,
is going to also share a little bit
Familia
about our work here,
Trans Queer
as
Liberation
well
Movement,
as Familia
va a
Trans Queer
compartir.
Liberation Movement is also
Nada,
going to
vamos
be
a abrir
sharing about our work.
un
And at
diálogo
the end, we're going to open it up to have a dialogue
reflexivo
among all of us
con
who
la
are
intención
here
de que
with the
podamos
intention of being able
juntos hacer un
to,
movimiento
together
para
build a stronger
abolir el
movement
narcoestado
to
policiaco,
abolish the
abolir la
police
negra,
state, abolish
abolir un
ICE,
mundo con fronteras y
abolish
imagínense lo
borders in
que
the world, and imagine
podemos
what we actually
lograr
want to
en
see and
generaciones
how we want to live
futuras.
now and for
Por estar
generations
con
moving
nosotros.
forward. Thank you
Pues
again
voy a
for
pasar
being
a
with
nuestra
us, and
compañera
I'm gonna
Amy, que va a
um,
presentarnos
pass it on
a la Red
to Amy,
Comunitaria Trans.
who's going to talk about the Trans Community Network.
Hola, buenas tardes para todos, todas, todes.
Hi,
Para
good
todos es un
good
gusto estar
afternoon to
acá
everyone. It's such a pleasure to
mis
be over here
hermanos de
with
lucha
my siblings in the
que nos
struggle
acompañan
who
desde
are
Bogotá,
joining us
Colombia.
all the way from Bogota,
He
Colombia.
compartido
And I've shared
unos links que nos
a couple of
compartió la
links
Red Comunitaria
that
Trans.
the Trans Community Network shared. I've shared
Digamos,
them on the
unas
link
páginas de
that
interés en sus redes sociales, unas campañas
link
de
us to some
arte,
social media
unas
pages, some
campañas de
art and
memoria que
media
han hecho.
campaigns, some
Y para
trans memory
comenzar,
campaigns that they've worked on.
pues yo
So
les
to start off, I want
quiero
to
rápidamente dar
really,
la
you know,
palabra a mis hermanos
quickly pass it on
de lucha,
to my
pero
siblings in the
vamos a
struggle.
comenzar primero con un
But
video que
we're
han
gonna start first
escogido para
with a video that
ilustrar,
they have chosen
digamos,
to
sus
start
aportes
this off
contra
to
la
show
violencia
the
policial,
work that they've
sus
been doing
aportes
against police
hacia
violence,
el
um,
mundo que
and
imaginan
against and towards the world that they imagine and that they want to live in.
transnacional
So I'm going to be
como de
sharing my
forma
screen.
generalizada.
But again, just in
Trans es
general,
una
the
organización
Trans Community
grassroots que
Network is a
lleva muchos
grassroots
años
organization
organizando en
that
las
has been
calles de
organizing
Bogotá
for several
contra la
years
violencia
in the streets
estatal,
of Bogota,
contra el
against
Estado
state
asesino,
violence, against a
contra,
murderous state,
digamos,
against
defendiendo a nivel
or rather
comunitario,
defending at the street
digamos,
level
los derechos
um,
de
the rights and
las personas
the
trans,
rights of trans
mujeres
folks,
trabajadoras
uh,
sexuales
of
en las
sex
calles de
workers
Bogotá.
who are in the streets of
Recientemente
Bogota.
han
Recently,
hecho,
they've
digamos,
also
un
been
trabajo muy importante
doing
para
a really
expandir
important
sus
work
redes a
expanding their
nivel
networks
internacional
internationally.
y
And
ellos van a compartir unas
and they're going to be
experiencias muy
sharing some of those
importantes de sus
experiences
luchas
that are very
también.
particular to their struggles here with
Entonces,
us
aquí voy a
today.
compartir
And so let me share
pantalla.
my screen.
¿Están viendo el Facebook?
Are y'all seeing the Facebook page?
No se escucha el sonido, Amy. No hay
Yeah,
audio.
we can't hear the sound, Amy.
Queremos escuchar.
Yeah, we want to hear.
No, no se escucha.
Y'all can't hear the sound?
No se escucha y ni solamente se puede ver.
Yeah, we can only see it, Amy.
Mis audífonos y me
So let me take my, can you hear it now?
Somos luz y somos sombra. Somos luz y somos sombras. En la oscuridad se construye todo lo que en la luz se disfruta. Somos luz y somos sombra. Energía masculina y energía femenina. Energía femenina y energía masculina. ¿Qué es lo natural? Femenino y masculino. Un regalo arrebatado. Femenino y masculino. Una forma de control. Femenino y masculino como estado de opresión. Femenino y masculino. Una forma de violencia. Masculino y femenino. El piso de un territorio en disputa. ¿Dijiste disputa o un barrio de putas? Sí, un barrio de putas, territorio en disputa. Es el rectángulo, un estado paralelo al estado. Quien respete las normas puede vivir sanamente y segura. ¿Segura? ¿Sentirse segura? Sí, sentirse segura, pero también violentada. Sentirse segura, pero también estafada. Sentirse segura y al mismo tiempo asesinada. Libre, pero a la vez enjaulada. Amada y también timada. Deseada y exterminada. Sobre todo deseada. Deseada en lo oculto. Deseada en la sombra. Deseada en lo clandestino. Deseada en el closet. Deseada en el fuego que te mata y te consume. Asesino el motivo de mi deseo. Si no hay cuerpo, no hay deseo. Dime un lugar donde sientas miedo. Nómbrame un cuerpo que te dé miedo y al mismo tiempo deseo. Una emoción que te lleve al miedo. Una experiencia que te huela a miedo. Porque lo natural es la transformación. El cuerpo como territorio. El cuerpo como estado. El cuerpo que se descompone. Cuerpo que se reconfigura. Que renace. Cuerpos habitados y deshabitados. Cuerpos en alquiler. Cuerpos esclavizados. Cuerpos para hacer memoria. Memoria para crear. Memoria para cambiar. Hacer memoria para no morir. Hacer memoria para resistir. Memoria para recordar. Memoria para denunciar. Hacer memoria para reparar. Hacer memoria para emancipar. Para sanar. También para bailar, gritar y cantar. Hacer memoria para sobrevivir. Para poder nacer. Pero también para poder morir en paz, por fin. Hacer memoria para trascender, hacer memoria para transformar. Marcha trans, haz memoria, marcha para despertar, despierta para cambiar, marcha para reivindicar, para resignificar el barrio, marcha para decirle a nuestras hermanas que no las olvidamos, que viven en nuestras luchas, que podrán cortar todas las flores, pero nunca podrán detener la primavera, que entenderá todo el mundo, porque somos malas y podemos ser peores. Marcha para escandalizar la vecina evangélica. Sabemos lo mucho que nos detesta. Es un respiro de justicia por un minuto. Esta es la fiesta de las galas, la gala de las galas. Esta es la fiesta de la rara, de la puta, de la ñera, de la loca, de la pegantera, de la bazuquera, de la acidosa. Este es un homenaje travesti al único territorio donde nos sentimos seguras. ¿Seguras? Seguras entre comillas. ¿Segura? ¿Saben qué es lo único seguro? Es que yo te amo, pero más me amo yo. Y si no me amas así, finalmente eso no me importa. Esto se trata de mí.
Muchísimas gracias. Si
Thank you
pudieron
so
ver
much.
las que
Were y'all able to see it?
Entonces, ahora voy a
So
presentar, dar la palabra
now I'm gonna
a Daniela
introduce Daniela Maldonado, Matilde Guerrero, and Álvaro Escobar. I would like them to introduce themselves, share more, and we can continue with the agenda for today.
Hola, yo soy Daniela Maldonado
Hi,
Salamanca.
my name is Daniela Maldonado. Thank you for this space, for this invitation. I really like being able to be here. I'm part of the Trans Community Network, one of the founders since 2012. This network comes out of the need for a space created by trans women, by sex workers, those of us who live under these vulnerable conditions, under the condition of poverty, and we want to be part of we wanted to create the space because this growing and this nascent LGBTQ movement didn't recognize these vulnerabilities, didn't recognize these conditions or the needs that we had. So we decided to create this space for trans women that respected our identities. That was a safe space, a space where through art we could create amazing processes with our siblings here in the neighborhood and on the streets. Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Thank you to Familia and to Stop LA. Well, yeah, to the coalition that's trying to abolish the police. Thank you for inviting us. My name is Matilde Guerrero. I'm a visual artist. I'm also part of the Trans Community Network since 2015, 2016. We've been collaborating on several artistic projects, and I'm in the struggle with my sisters. Hi, my name is Alvaro. I joined the network not too long ago, and basically I was able to help in a research project on police violence and police abuse against trans women in Bogotá. And so yeah, we're here in the struggle. If y'all want, we could start talking a little bit more about the video that y'all saw at the beginning. Does that sound good, Danny? Okay. So first, I'm going to share a little bit about what the Trans Community Network is. As Matilde, and as I was saying earlier, it comes out of an initiative for trans women that were living in the Santa Fe neighborhood that's in downtown Bogotá. And the Santa Fe neighborhood has some really peculiar cultural and social dynamics that have experienced a lot of difficulties. There's a lot of communities that are marginalized and vulnerable, communities that have been displaced because of the armed conflict, as well as the general displacement that happens throughout Colombia. So it's a zone that, that has some really difficult, really tough social problems. And so that's where we started creating this network, because we wanted to create well-being for our lives, and particularly in the zone, we couldn't we couldn't find a space in the broader LGBTQ movement. They were excluding us for being horse, for being trans, or other things. And so what we decided was to unite amongst ourselves and to create this space that we now call the Trans Community Network as an initiative, as a space for gathering, where we could share our different experiences at the community level, and through through very popular pedagogies, popular processes, we were able to accompany lots of our sisters in different artistic processes, political processes, other ways to show up. So do we have time? We don't have to interpret myself, right? Or do I just keep going? Oh yeah, I just keep going. Yeah, you're being interpreted simultaneously. So yeah, keep going.
Se me olvidó.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry. Oh yeah, what was I saying?
Que
Okay, yeah. So let's say, you
hemos
know,
logrado, por ejemplo, a través
we've
de
been able to achieve, for
encontramos
example,
una herramienta
we
de
found
incidencia política y
in
política
art
que
a
nos
really
en
powerful
este momento no encontramos
political
espacios
tool
en los
and
que
civic tool
nosotros
because
pudiéramos estar
we were able
a
to,
hablar de lo que nos está
at that
pasando
time we weren't able to find the
alrededor de este
spaces
conflicto y es una herramienta que
or the
genera
stages or or
participación de
the
personas
areas to be able to talk about what we were
experimental
going through.
que
And
une
so
precisamente
it
hablar del
through
contexto
this artistic process, it
por los que
makes
nosotras pasamos
what we have to
para
tell, our
describir
stories, like our life
cómo
stories, that what we have to go
estamos
through,
revictimizando
it
todo el tiempo
it
diciendo cómo
it reshifts it, it reframes it in a different way. It's not about a person victimizing or re-victimizing themselves, telling, you know, telling their story of struggle. It's about reframing that and taking back the power through their stories to be able to, you know, to fight for different rights, socially, politically, etc. But you know what? I, regardless of whether I have that, I can stand out in the street and talk about what what I need, what I want. So it's a way to revert that and to revert that power structure and also to reclaim the gaze and actually shift the gaze out to other people um, who are who are out in the streets and who are in our communities. So are there any questions? Danny, maybe we can talk a little bit about the Trans March, which was part of the video that we just showed a while ago. So speaking of the Trans March, it's a space that was thought of, you know, that talks about the context in a transvestite march and space and demonstration and rally that honors the folks that have been assassinated in the Santa Fe neighborhood. So in Colombia, that is the only stage, the only space that we have to create this type of remembrance space, the space to honor a population that has been so minoritized, so invisibilized. So there's this extermination that's going on, all these hate crimes that have to do with transphobia, that have to do with our gender identity. And so, you know, this type of setting creates, it keeps garnering this hate. And so we thought of this mobilization to also talk about the way that we experience violence and conflict and displacement, but specifically in the capital, right? People in Colombia, everyone thinks that that the war in Colombia only happens out in the rural areas or in the provinces, but we know that the very center of Bogota, we're still seeing that same type of social cleansing, of extermination, of genocide. It's not just a general genocide, but it's part of a state policy that involves and uses the police to carry out this extermination. So this is all part of the discourse around this platform called Yo Marcho Trans, or I March as I'm trans and I march. And so this has been really successful because at the first march, it was like five of us just kind of like working to plan it with some posters, walking out in the street. Now we have thousands and thousands of people. And, you know, and of course we have this element of art, right? That really is centered. Um, and also I want to shout out to the work of our compañero Tomás Espinosa, who has an arts collective that's also been really influential and helpful with us. And so we have this idea, right, that comes from a lot of the big manifestations in different European cities to create some sort of installation, some sort of sculpture or like physical manifestation that gets displayed and carried throughout the streets, right? And this is a part to this is a way to really empower and retake the streets and challenge these really patriarchal and centrist and racist and conservative politics of the more mainstream LGBTQ movement and of society at large, right? So you know, oftentimes we think these are completely different struggles, right? Right? Like we have a different reality, right? Like marriage is fine, but that's not a reality. We're fighting to not be killed. And so that's why we don't feel recognized or embraced or welcome in the struggle. So what we decided to do was basically um, tear tear apart this quilt to break it up, right? To acknowledge that, you know, we're disconnected from this broader movement, right? So folks keep using like LGBTQ or LGBT, right? And so they keep using this broad label, and that invisibilizes and like takes away possibility to advocate and create and influence other spaces, right? Because we as trans women, we have all these shared realities. So again, we wanted to bring this up in different spaces, including being in spaces like this right now, right? Because we know that trans folks are some of the hardest hit communities that are impacted by state violence, by police violence, because of everything that we represent, right? This fear, we are essentially destabilizing their quote unquote social order that's being imposed by the state, right? So it's important for us to take the stage to really center all this work that we've been doing all the way from the network. You know, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of sort of folks who are detained. Um, we do a lot of accompaniment work for our sisters who are locked up in different prisons. We also do a lot of popular education through community schools um, that we are able to provide these spaces where sisters, right, can connect with each other and strengthen their skills, their abilities to do this work. So the network also becomes like a defense center, a place to develop your thinking, your politics, your analysis, right? Building popular power, but we also have folks who have been really generous with us, maybe folks who have come from the academy, who have other privileges, and are sharing some of those tools with us. And so we are creating these platforms so that all those things are accessible for folks that haven't had access to that, right? So that's also part of the trans community network, because if it weren't for this mutual support and mutual connections we have in the different branches of our work, right? Right, because it's about bringing something forward as well as learning and taking something. But you know, we we want to also exchange experiences, ways of thinking, knowledge, and wisdom. So yeah, it's a really wonderful space. It's you know, it's it's all the wonderful, it's queer, it's fag, it's sex positive, etc.
I think that's what the community trans network is about. If you'd like, I can tell you a bit about the process, the research process that Daniela and Alvaro have been doing. So I'm going to hand the word over to Alvaro. Well, hi. Well, as Daniela was saying, this, this talking about this idea of struggle. It was yes, Daniela, Amy, and they co-designed this project to rescue memory, right, and understand all of those, all of that police violence that trans community in Bogota has suffered. And so at first, what we wanted to do was to collect testimony to talk about to retell that violence. But then we were a bit more ambitious, and so what we did was generate, I'm not sure if to call it understanding or knowledges about the police. So normally when we have when we have this research, you say so we're going to do this, and we're going to talk about the police. We're going to research that. And so that is what we've been doing up until now. And so that idea research, the research was to compare police violence before 1991 with the police violence that is going on now. Because before 1991, uh, uh, so why before 1991? Because before that date, trans people were not recognized by the law. So they, as if they didn't exist. And so after 1991, they exist. And so it was, so the idea was to see how that process happened from from the police taking from that place after the recognition of trans women. There would be a change in this kind of violence in the testimony from before and after 1981. What did we see? Violence continued. It was very similar. And so basically it was the same. Nothing has changed. There is no recognition. But well, and so we took on the task of like, what has the police changed? And so we took on the task of reading scientific newspaper of the police. How do they organize? What are they calling a prostitute? And so we started doing all of these kinds of research, looking upon the documents that they use. And so found some changes, right, that have happened throughout time, but I'm not sure how deep to go into that because of time constraints. But let's say basically, I think we can say is that before 1991, they talked about themselves as people or an institution in charge of keeping order, of keeping society's order, right? So everything's in order, anything, whatever that means, like a state of equilibrium, a peaceful state. And so what we found today is that it is no longer that idea of order, but they've took on this role of like cohabitation, right? Like co-living, that is basically the same thing, but it has very different matrices, right? But let's say in respect of trans women, in respect of trans women, or as it regards trans women, this change came different when we talked about changes. We were talking about correcting something, and so in this case we have thousands of cases of trans women that are violated, assassinated, raped here under this new convivencia that they're calling. It's it's a bit different. So let's say before 1991, if they weren't recognized as people, so they'd say a man dressed as a woman, you go to the jail, I hit you. And now upon recognition, I'll, I'll I'll hit you because I think that you stole a cell phone. It's no longer the punishment because of existence, but so your existence is punished, but through a different avenue, right? And so at the end of the day, it's a very similar result, right? Within these changes, we also saw something that we called our attention, right? This idea that they're calling convivencia, uh, uh, which is like co-living, right? Is assumed since 1994 as politics of agency. So we have to generate a value. And so what is it that is giving y'all value? So according to them, it is sort of like recognition from society. And so it's what we're seeing, all these campaigns that they're doing, that the police is doing, that they're how they are integrated as part of the community, how they are members of the community, that they're not different from others, from civil society, right, as they call us, but that they are part of community. So within this strategy, specific strategy about trans women, they had never said anything about trans women, and now we can see a commercial, a TV ad or an ad, and they say that they are defending trans women. From one day to another, they're sort of like paying honor to trans people, and as part of this politics of us trying to assume themselves as part of the civil society, guarantee this co-living, cohabiting, talking about prevention. It's all so entangled, right? You're doing well. You're doing well. Can you talk to us a bit about the context in which this is the network is situated, and how is police order, police violence in those in this particular zones or locations of the city, and how does the network react to this from maybe from this place of art, from the place of art, or these different interventions? And so, well, basically, the trans community network is located in a part of town that is called, that I missed, I'm sorry. It's so called that it's a tolerance zone, that which means that they are sex work is tolerated. So that space is considered a nexus of criminalization, right? So sex work is not a crime. They start criminalizing a bunch of practices around people that do sex work, right? So as Alvaro was saying, in the sense that they no longer are attacking a trans person because of identity, they are attacking her because they're consumers. They're assuming that they're robbers, or could be, but so they start adjudicating these adjectives that end up in criminalization, and so they call this a nexus or a point of criminalization or criminality. And so the presence that they have here is, for example, today, right now, since quarantine or confinement started, the barrio is totally militarized and full of police in the main streets of the barrio, despite the fact that people need to continue working because they live off what they produce on the day. That's how people can pay their household and their what they need. Uh, and the state in general in Colombia has not provided any support so people can stay at home. So despite the fact that they don't have any collaboration from the state, the police comes over and tries to stop them from working, or so those kinds of nexus of criminalization are where we're doing our work. Daniela was describing clearly what whores are, maricas are. Uh, Here, so for example, here at the network, we have people that ask us. We have a kitchen that is called we're bad and we could be worse. This idea that we're not adapting to the state, and they try to come here and tell us no, that we need to erase all of the experiences of intervention that we've done to be able to be accepted according to their methodology. And that is how the police works, right? generating a moral punishment upon people, despite the fact that they really, like really to be a trans person is not a crime, but anything that surrounds the life of a trans person is criminalized. And so that is the space in which we are. And it's the place where people that are part of the research, they narrate testimonies of violence from that place or space. And so from that, the theme that like we're bad, we could be worse. It started a campaign, and so if you can talk to us about that initiative and how it was. And hey, so this idea, the street art, graffiti, the mural with with different artists, we have intervened in different streets on the barrio, a bit about the reappropriation of the only zone that we have to be in, as Mati was saying, the sort of like finding each other of people that are coming upon to these sites from those sites toward criminalization. And so it's a site of more police control. So for example, in this pandemic times, there's no support, there's no market. We're in a cycle of poverty that systemic restriction that's super intense. There's no opportunity. We are not in an equal situation. Access to education, access to health, they are precariorized conditions, right? Because the barrio, aside from the fact, is also a barrio that's architecturally super interesting. There's there's a bunch of sites that don't meet the standard of where people could live with a quality of life, but their sites are not are ugly, not with no dignity. You have to pay as if you lived not in the periphery. So it's you have to pay the same thing as a person that's paying paying at university at that rate, and from a different zone, for example. So it's a bit like let's say it's a bit all of these situations of violence, of poverty, of exclusion, and so it gives police violence and police repression there all the time. But there's more. It's not. They don't want to just remove the girls from that zone, but they search for to make say something around identity. So they use rubber guns or so they hit you in the glutes, in the tits, in the face. Uh, why? Because ultimately, as whores, we depend on our image as well, and so they search to hurt us there, and to eliminate in some sort of way this feminized body that is that is what the police is attacking and hurting. And so these conditions in this theme of the pandemic, or in the context of the pandemic, police uh, make take advantage of that situation. Uh, and so no one has we no longer have they take away our cell phones, um, and they ask for money so that they can get back their phones. And so they end up being doing these attacks This is why we don't say this is why we have that theme that says sort of the police doesn't take care of us, sex workers take care of us, or trans people take care of us, or also uh, it exchange sexual exchanges so that they're not taken, so that I'm not taken away, so that I'm not uh, uh, arrested or fined. So all of these adversity, vulnerability, it's a territory that's super violent territory to attempt to make art uh, and creativity that's artistic or cultural. It takes up on more because it goes against the current, right? It goes of situation of violence, of homicide, of police violence, and so we took on the walls of the street where we that are surrounded when we do the sex work. So it's like upgrading your home, remodeling. You paint the walls in your house. This is our house. We have this idea of like that your neighbors are seeing you all the time, and so that also connects with our siblings, right? Our compas, that what they'd like to talk about. And so we started this process in distinct areas of the barrio. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Uh, it's a typical plate in Colombia. So through the transcocho, we do uh, this expression of affect through food. It's like a demonstration of collective, of being together by sharing a dish. People from different social classes, gender, sex, right? Like where this matters, uh, that we're all connected. And what I'm saying is that we didn't start alone through this process, but we went through this process being generous of what we've learned and are together in this process. Uh, the girls are also super generous with their knowledge. They know how to weave a network and a thread that are really beautiful. I'd like to add that uh, this theme of we are bad, we can be worse, it comes out of different contexts, trans women, cis women, to be able to appropriate of 8M, the 8th of March, the day of Women's Day, that there's different ways of being women that have been excluded. And so to be dignified on that day, you have to be a martyr. And so in that sense, we are worse and we are bad and we can be worse. We don't need to be virgin to be celebrated, to be accepted. We are bad and we can be worse. We're the horse, we are the lesbians, the machorras. I mean, I meant to say the lesbians. We find each other from the corners of what you shouldn't be as a woman, to say like, no, you're not going to tell me what version of me you expect, and I will tell you what women I am, and if you don't like it, well, go suck it, and we can be worse. So assume it, because I've assumed it myself, and that was so powerful that that little something about us, sort of like us writing that manifesto, and it becomes part of the march, and it's super beautiful to see how this chant is sort of seen on the as a flag, right? I'd like to thank you for sharing, and more than anything for the labor that you're doing, giving us a little bit of a window to share from your heart. We appreciate this exchange. These exchanges are super important. How we can continue supporting each other. So I'd like to thank you.
So there's going to
There's
be more
more
spaces also
space
to
to
share
share.
and listen from folks. I know that a
I
lot
know
of the
that more
folks who
people
are
have
listening
questions,
are
and
having a lot of questions. We're going to open that space. So before we open the space up, we have two more folks that want to share some words connecting to the movements that are going on here in the US, back to the movement in Colombia. So I want to open up the space to Chela Coleman. Um, uh, she's a co-facilitator of within the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition of a committee that talks about sexuality and gender. And we created this committee because we wanted to make sure that we had a focus and a framework that was centering the ways that the police state impacts the trans community and the non-binary community. Um,
No binaria.
yeah, the non-binary community. And so Chela wants to share a bit more about that connection, and I know that Chela also has a couple of questions. And after that, um, we're also going to hear from Umi and Jenny Set. Um, uh, Both of them are part of our organization, the Trans and Queer Liberation Movement, FAMILIA. So first, let's go to Chela.
And then to ask your questions.
Chela, go ahead and unmute. You can unmute.
Okay, y'all, this is my first time on my laptop, so I'm sorry for the weirdness. That was beautifully said, and yes, thank you everyone for being here. As someone said, my name's Chela. I've been organizer with Stop LAPD Spying. I've been an organizer for the last 7 years with them. So something that they've been doing has been around police surveillance and the tools and the tactics that police use to criminalize and put people behind bars, and specifically in the area of Skid Row, which is Skid Row is a neighborhood in LA, which is the poorest of the poor, and it's the most criminalized in the U.S. So while the founders and the groups realized that they would talk about race a lot and acknowledge that like folks were getting arrested and or being murdered because of their race, right? As we know, Black Lives Matter is bringing the view to that. We started acknowledging that it's not just cis Black men, that it's also trans women of color, and more in particularly trans Black women. And so we decided to start, addressing some of the conversations that have been had to go on in the space of Stop LAPD Spying, as well as our larger communities. Let's see, we've been meeting for the last 2 years. It's been 2 years that we started, y'all, which is great. Oh, by the way, I just have to say, Janessa, I love you. So glad you're here. Anyway, yeah, I think our work is focused on inclusion, and that includes intersex folks as well. And that includes working with groups outside of Stop LAPD spying, such as, you know, FAMILIA and SWAP, which is Sex Workers Outreach Project of Los Angeles. I've been doing things with them lately as well. And so, like, you know, taking the lens and using a bigger lens to stop the violences that are going on that are harming our communities. Yeah, I said a lot. Any questions before I ask my questions? That I had 3, but you answered 1. So if you have any questions, I'm down to answer. Okay. My question was, speaking of, so I have a friend who I invited to this, but they couldn't make it. They are from Colombia themselves, and something they keep, they don't know how to explain to me, is I'm always wondering about the indigenous population and, you know, gender variant / trans folks in those communities. Do y'all find time or find ways to like reach out to them as well? That was my question.
Thank you, Chela. No sé si el grupo escuchó la pregunta en
So
español.
I don't know if the folks from Bogotá heard the question in Spanish. Daniela, Álvaro, or Matilde? So do you want the response right now or at the end? Do you
I
want me
mean,
to answer
I'm
right now?
done. I was actually muting myself. Like, I muted.
Well, this topic with indigenous communities, right? This is similar to the rest of the population. We know that we've been here in Colombia, we've been under an armed conflict for over 50 years. That's still going on right now. That includes the systematic murder of social leaders, of rural workers, of other movement leaders that are against the repression from the murderous government, right? So we, you know, we're part of this narco state that has this ongoing violent situation, and so all of these realities are really played out in the rural areas, right? Um, and so and so many of these folks are also coming from super ultra Catholic spaces where Catholicism has colonized a lot of the rural spaces. There's a lot of patriarchal and machista ideologies, right? Again, because of these rural kind of like Catholic colonized areas that isn't as connected or isn't as aware about what's going on in the big cities, right? They hear they hear people talk about trans and this and that, but there's not a lot of clarity or a lot of conversations going on around gender because there are some, you know, there's a lot of disinformation. So a lot of these folks were, for example, trans folks that come from indigenous communities, they are displaced to the big cities again because of the conflict, because of the war has led them to poverty, but also because many of them are coming from, you know, like their families or their communities, they're being rejected by them because of their gender identity or because of their sexual orientation, right? So they are really difficult conditions. There's a lack of institutional responses to support these folks, right, who are living a similar situation under poverty and exclusion, right, that other folks, but that are further impacted because they are part of an indigenous group or indigenous community. So there's this whole chain of exclusion, right?
Stella, you have a question?
So,
And then we can pass it to Umi.
Thank you. So to get back to the fight in LA, we have, so Stop LAPD Spying has like a sister organization that we're housed in. and it's on the front lines of a lot of the fighting against, number one, against anti-Black racism, number two, against homelessness, because like I said, Skid Row's population has got the highest population of homeless in the U.S. And they have we have a music and arts program, and this beautiful person, Ko, is a part of that. So, Ko, would you like to talk? Would you like to talk about things that you have seen, and as well as talk about the fight and the work that we're doing right now?
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. First off, I just wanted to say I've really enjoyed the presentation. And just want to talk a little bit about just in general how the work has sort of proliferated here in Skid Row. Skid Row, if you've never heard of Skid Row in Los Angeles, it is the biggest concentration of houseless folks, I think anywhere in the country, but definitely in California, which has the highest percentage of houseless folks in the nation. And the numbers are only rising, particularly due to COVID-19. And in a city where where the population is about 8 to 9% African American, the population in Skid Row, the houseless population, particularly in Skid Row, is about 70 to 80% of the people who are houseless and on the streets. And there are a large percentage of those who identify as LGBTQIA or are MSM, men who have sex with men, who don't identify. And that is a really big contingent. And I wanted to point out a little bit that some of the concentration needs to be on that population, because these are gentlemen who do not identify as any of the letters, but do help to commit a lot of the trans violence that I see in the community. And it's really important to understand that there are a lot of people, a lot of men here, particularly with the way our culture doles out manhood, who consider the activity that they're participating in with a trans woman to be something that's just for after dark, something that is not talked about. And if it is talked about and if it is seen, it is an almost immediate source of embarrassment for them, and a reason for violence. And I'm sure we know that throughout the world, that's where a lot of trans violence originates. But I particularly have seen and want to talk just a little bit about the discrimination that I see sometimes within this group. And what I mean about that is, I think that as an LGBTQ person myself, IA person myself, that I'm focusing myself and having to work hard to focus myself on more trans issues. I think that within the community, there needs to be a lot more education, particularly with lesbian women and gay men, that trans issues are our issues, that we cannot move past or move forward with anything until our trans brothers and sisters are really given the same level of advocacy that we give to what I would consider our mainstream gays. And what I mean by mainstream gays is mostly white gay folks. When you think of the gay movement here in the United States, you don't always see people of color. People of color in queer circles are still often left behind. And trans women and men are really left behind. And so I want to issue just that challenge for us as we continue to do this work. Also, trans, gay, and lesbian youth are almost 30 times more likely to become homeless. 30 times, that's a lot. And often in my work, I see young people who have been thrown out of their homes because of what's going on. they decided to talk about their sexual orientation, or they decided to come out as trans or come out as gay. And in this society where religion holds sway still, we're still fighting that battle. And so I just wanted to point out that we have to do a better job of making sure that people are educated, that they know what the issues are, but also that they challenge themselves. I consider myself a pretty forward-thinking person, and often I have to challenge and correct and check myself on a lot of the issues in the trans community and in the community at large, so that we make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to being a part of the change we wish to see. So that's pretty much what I have to say.
I would love to add, just before we move on, so thinking around like the history of, like, we just left Pride Month in June. The history of Pride has been whitewashed, right? Like, folks still don't know who threw the first brick, right? Folks need to remember it was trans and gender non-variant women of color that were leading those kind of movements, right? And it's not just in Stonewall, but one happened in LA and Silver Lake, Echo Park area. One also happened in the Bay. And like also thinking of like folks who are like still fighting for number one, their own selves, and and the right to live, like both on a like legislation level and on a physical level. Like thinking of CC McDonald, who was a trans Black woman who was accosted by white racists, and she defended her life. And when she, used scissors to defend her life, cops came and arrested her because the dude died. Even though the dude had like a lot of drugs in his system, and I'm not shaming folks who use drugs, I'm just saying he was not in his right mind, even though he was the aggressor, they didn't allow anything for her defense, right? But she's out of prison now. She was in prison for about 3 to 5 years. And now she's like, speaking on prison abolition. If you want to know her story, there is a documentary called Free CC, and it's by Laverne Cox. Laverne Cox from Orange is the New Black and a bunch of other TV shows championed her case, as well as Devarius Love / Isha Love, who defended herself against her attacker too, right? Like she legit didn't want her attacker to go and attack another Black trans woman, so she ended up killing her attacker and faced life by doing that. But she's also out too. So thinking about those and thinking about, I'm gonna keep it real. One of my Cheryls is here, and I said hi to her earlier. Genesect Gutierrez, just speaking up against, liberal, liberal politics, when it doesn't really include us all. And so I just think about those things because, there is a statement that says somewhere around the world, every 24 hours, 32 hours, a trans woman is murdered. And that, I'm always remembering my trans Latina sisters who are getting murdered or who are like trying to come over and they're being denied just for survival, So yeah, I just wanted to bring those things to our awareness. I know that does take up a lot of space, but
no, it's important. It's important that you brought that up. And I particularly just want to say the neoliberalism piece is so important, because I think that a lot of people get in their heads that, because somebody has a liberal or conservative slant, that often matters. And often it doesn't. Sometimes liberalism is giving lip service to doing what's right and not at all giving the time to doing what's right. And that's why it's so important that we not get caught in those type of identity politics.
I like that. That's real. I'm done. I'm sorry, y'all.
All good. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing and sharing on behalf of Skid Row too, or sharing from a very important part of the globe too. I think this exchange is really important. And want to add to the conversation, Umi Vera too. Umi, thank you for joining us. And just some connections with what has been shared, as well as talk about the movement to abolish ICE. The FAMILIA Trans Queer Liberation Movement is part of. Anything you think is important to share in this conversation is welcome. And then we'll open it up to everybody else who has a lot of wisdom to exchange here too. Thank you all.
Sí, cierto. Y además también, pues, como han mencionado,
Yes, of course. As people have mentioned, Jenny said Gutierrez is also here, colleague and organizer here with Familia. My name is Umi. It's an honor to be able to share this space with you, with all the key work that you're doing in LA, with Stop LA Spying Coalition, and particularly also all of what you're sharing that about organizing in Bogotá. Familia is an organization, political home for trans, queer community, LGBT community, Latinx here in the US, but we also have collaborations and connect with people that are outside of the US and that support the idea that we want to see abolition of ICE in our generation. And so that these abolitionist movements, as Daniela was saying, it's necessary to focus and see all of the racism that the state acts upon, that is the same that violence that Black activist community have been advocating for a really long time for abolition of prisons, and see ways in which we also organize. In 2017, Familia was also able to organize around a trans experience in detention centers and detention jails in Santa Ana to close. And after that, we saw that there is a detention center in New Mexico outside of Albuquerque, and these are specialized detention centers specifically for trans community, and we've seen that and so I guess we've supported a lot of campaigns. Particularly, we're still asking for justice for Roxana Hernandez and Joana Medina. And so then we have a lot of collaborations and campaigns that are directly led by trans immigrant community in the US. When within a couple of about 2 months or some weeks that we responded to the assassination of Roxana, we had approximately 125 trans and queer people, the majority of them immigrants, asking the city of Albuquerque to 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 invest in that. I'm sorry, I missed it. We've also been collaborating with BLMP. They had the campaign of with this person from Nigeria that was in deportation process. that was at risk of great violence in his country. And so a lot of this that was organized gave visibility to the Roxana campaign, that all of the crimes that were committed by the detention center, that she was so weak when she was being processed at the detention center, and all of the people that were part of the caravan organized a hunger strike, and all of the processes uh, that that they try to do so that she could access medical attention, which was denied, and and it was and she was at the hands of the detention center for 3 weeks before she was killed. Uh, so there was a week of action that was organized by the trans community, trans immigrant community, and there wasn't. Uh, the week had not ended on that first year before hearing that on the same detention center, they also contributed to the assassination of Joana Medina at Cibola as well. And so we see all of the ways in which the state does not care, even though uh, they they made it a requirement by the DHS. This is how this sort of mandate that says that this is how you incarcerate trans community, and so even doing so, they still don't do it. And so we can see that they haven't cared for trans people for people in detention centers, and particularly trans people in detention centers. We also have two different programs that I'd like to uplift. One is a leadership circle. We have around 17 leaders around the whole country, trans and queer, that support our strategy to mobilize campaigns. We have the leadership circle, which is Jotas versus Size, which is basically saying that we are against ICE as an institution, uh, and they're recognizing the fact that trans and queer community have always been on the front lines, on the front battle, fighting for human rights. Another key program that has been super key to the way that we organize is the program that Mariela facilitates, healing and liberation retreats. That's a series of retreats that have left detention within on some weekends. They leave the city and go into nature to connect, to be able to establish practices of healing practices. And so, yes, we mobilize so that one day we can see within our generation the abolition of ICE and our healing of trans and queer community, and the liberation as well. I talked a lot. Jenny said it's also here with us if you'd like to share. Jenny said, go ahead if you'd like to add. Hi, good night. Only briefly. Hi, hola, Chela. I love you a lot. Send you kisses. There's various people that we've collaborated with. We have Jen and Jessica from El Paso. I'm super honored, so happy sending you hugs. It's an honor to listen to the work of our siblings in Colombia. We think that the struggle of our community is global, and it does not limit itself to the US. Here, the only thing I'd like to add is, because I'd like people to go through the Q&A, I'd like people to be able to connect with folks from Colombia, is that the visibility of trans community, specifically trans Black women or trans women of color, is the community that suffers the most violent. In this we've seen I think 27 assassinations. It's super sad. We have to continue figuring out ways of continuing on the struggle, different strategies. It's going to be super intense, and because the election is coming up in November, and the attacks on trans community does not stop. Currently, we have I think 16 states that is legislating against us. It's super sad that we've lost trans immigrant sisters, Roxana and Joana Medina, who was detained in El Paso and then was sent to Otero in Arizona, where ICE or immigration knew that the community was mobilizing and asking for justice. So Joanna, when she started saying that she was not in good health, the first day of the Pride Month is uh, uh, when Joanna loses her life, unfortunately. And so we continue organizing and fighting. I just wanted to thank you so much for your comments, and I'd like to have folks be able to ask questions. Thank you, Jenny said. We have around 30 minutes to share. And my baby as well. I'm breastfeeding as well. So we have around 30 minutes and we have our life. But right now, any questions that people like to share in this space, and with the hope of being able to continue this collaboration. Thank you so much for your patience and for listening in.
Real quickly, Mariela, so folks can either raise their hand or send a question in chat, or we can try, because we've been unmute everybody. And then if folks want to ask a question, but if you are not asking a question and if there's background noise, please mute yourself. So we're going to give that a shot. Let's see. So folks can unmute themselves if they have a question, and please go ahead. Jessica, did you have a question?
Sí.
Please.
Okay, buenas noches.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Hi, Chela. Hi, Janicet. Y hi, Mariela.
Hola, Mariela.
A todas y
And so everyone who is okay. Maybe it's not a question, but it is raising our fist and applauding to Daniela Maldonado for the work. I am a trans woman. It's very hard to listen to the stories of our lives, of each one of us, because we are part of the society, and we're not the problem. In different countries, we see problems that the government is stigmatizing us, is excluding us from health, education, work, housing, and it corners us to do sex work. Today, in this pandemic in Latin America, our community is the community that is suffering the most, right? And so I am one of the people that, because that if you know, I left my country because of abuse of the state, of the government, right? To come to this place to find refuge. But more than that, I want to say that you're not alone. More that there's organization that supports us. I left a detention center, and I applaud Familia TQLM. Because since the day I left the detention center, they've been alongside me. There's people, you know, there's other more people, and we're with you, and I want to applaud you. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
¿Alguien más? Does anyone else have a question or a reflection you'd like to share back?
Hi,
Hi, my name is Coco. I am connecting from Puerto Rico, so I'm going to speak Spanish because it's my first language, but I do also speak English. And I am connecting because I saw the promo through Community Trans Network, and I am super happy to be sharing this space with you and to be able to listen to you, because here, right, in Puerto Rico, I am a non-binary person, a Black non-binary person, sex worker as well. And my community is also facing a lot of violence and precarity, right? And so I'm super interested in being able to take on those themes and the way in which we're building another world for ourselves within this colony, right? Really to be able to build frameworks and have points of reference, right? Because it's been super, I can't even describe it, right? To hear Daniela and to hear about all of the work that the network, the Trans Community Network in Colombia does, and just to simply know that this is possible, that we can make it happen, right? That the work that La Corilla is doing, the work that Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, that is also super important work, and that I believe that this fusion and this conversation that we're having is, you know, like, you know, makes me want to continue building this world, right? Of, you know, all of our dissident bodies and sort of like this trans-colonial state to create this links and networks. And right now I'm currently in Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, and we're everywhere, right?
Bigger than what it might seem to you, and that is reaching places that you're not even thinking of. And I remember going to Marcha del 8M and chanting, somos malas, podemos ser peores. So that's amazing, and I'm so happy.
Gracias, Coco.
Thank you, Coco. And if you'd like to share something on the chat from Puerto Rico as well, so that we can continue supporting you over there in Puerto Rico. Let's stay in touch, please. Anyone else want to share, have a reflection or a question? Hi, everyone. How are you? I am saying hello from Bogotá. Laura, I wanted to appreciate Alvaro and Matilde that are doing amazing work. Please extend my appreciation to Juli, because you're doing also so my question is basically, what can allies do to support the work that you're doing, specifically in Bogota, to denounce police violence?
Do I answer? Okay. Or you're gonna do an answer, right? Well, hi. There, there are lots of ways to be allies um, with with trans folks, and first of all, it's by respecting their voices and their spaces, building alongside with trans folks, and not overtaking the spaces created by and for trans folks. Um, I think there's other ways to be an ally. For example, when one is generous with the knowledge and the tools that you have, right? Sometimes that's a great way to use your privilege as a tool that can help other folks that may not have had access to that. And so that in a way can ensure that this opportunity that you had can also be replicated by other folks who don't share that privilege. So that's a great way to be an ally to the trans struggle, right? Turn your privilege into a tool, into a resource, right? That's could always be something that's useful for folks who don't have, for those of us who don't have access to that. So I think transforming your privilege into a bridge, I think can be really transformative and can be have a really important impact for trans folks. I think could be um, a really valuable addition to our work. Thank you. I would like to add as well, um, basically what we have experienced with the network is that even though identity politics can be helpful to create um, a new identity, right? To affirm an identity that folks want to exterminate. There are also ways that these same identity politics can be wedges and can be ways to separate our communities. So we have identified that we can't play this game of social segregation, right? Because
Mm.
folks who are trans, who have lived through state and police violence, um, a lot of them are coming from really humble um, homes, from really Christian households that have all of these colonial values that force trans folks um, to be kicked out of their homes and end up in a worse situation. So um, this the identity this doesn't just happen because of their gender identity. It also happens because they come from a territory in Colombia where there's a strong armed conflict, right? So there's a lot of different ways where we try to excavate and get rid of these barriers that the state um, puts down on us and actually try to find the roots, right? The roots of poverty, the roots of the vulnerabilities that we're facing. And from those roots, that's where we start identifying our affinity and our connections, right? I think that these types of rights that we want to these rights that we want to fight for our trans sisters, if we can make sure that they have the rights to have a life with dignity and safety, then that's gonna make it so that everyone in Colombia has a life with dignity and safety.
Thank
So
you.
there's some folks who are also putting some stuff in the chat.
Mariela, I have a
that-
stack going if you don't mind. So Kelly was next. They wanted to ask a question from our folks in Colombia. So go ahead, Kelly, if you want to unmute yourself, please. I'm keeping a stack.
Spanish sucks, so I'm gonna English. My question is to the organization in Colombia. How do y'all when you're combating police violence? How do you also find alternatives to not calling the police? Because over here, in where I'm from, in my neighborhood, we're taking alternative men with so where we don't need the police when there's like a crisis. So I'm just wondering how you all in Colombia focus on strategies, or like what are some strategies that you all create that don't involve the police in during crisis? Yeah.
Un poco para contestar esto, por
So
ejemplo.
to answer this, I would say, for example, a while ago when quarantine started off, it was in March at the national level. At that time, the mayor of Bogotá, who is a woman, who is a lesbian, and openly feminist lesbian mayor, and she also she used her LGBTQ identity as part of her political platform to get elected, to be like, wow, the first time that there's a woman mayor, the first time that's an openly lesbian. So she really manipulated, right, a lot of folks um, from from a lot of the LGBTQ sectors to win her election, right? And so she supposedly is super progressive. She calls herself like, really progressive. What what happens when the pandemic starts here in Colombia? She releases this really transphobic executive order, right? That basically it's this thing called that basically this order says that people can only go out in the street based on their gender and their sex, right? Which is a really essentialist and binary um, definition of that. And so instead of creating quote unquote safety, that exacerbates the violence that we are experiencing um, even before the pandemic, right? So through that order, she is actually exacerbating, right, like what violence and exclusion and poverty looks like for our communities during the pandemic. So this pico género order is a really transphobic order that goes against the life of trans folks, that puts us at risk, that really limits the economic opportunities that we have. Because if we were already living in fear from the police, right, um, the the worst thing that can happen to one of us in Colombia is to have any sort of interaction with the police officers. Like even as sex workers, we don't work with police officers. We don't fuck police officers, right? Like that's and because we know like the impact, right? We know like the that any type of interaction with them is going to be horrible and that it's going to end up really badly. And so this order puts our lives at risk anytime that we want to go to get groceries, to get food, or to try to find a way to pay for your rent, right? You know that we know that these conditions of poverty are structural, right, and are compounded by our gender experience, everything to do with housing, with our access to dignity and safety. And so this further pushes us into a situation of poverty. So living during a pandemic in the middle of these conditions is really difficult. And as I was saying, right, now there's now these supposedly police that are assigned by gender that are out patrolling the streets can go to you and question you and start harassing you about your gender, right? And so this goes from the legislative piece to the social aspect, where we see a lot of that that's taken over social networks, where now they're using this order to make fun and create jokes about trans people, like what are they going to do, and what night are they going to go out at, etc. And so again, this has compounded the type of hate and the type of harassment that we see. And so thanks to the work of the Trans Community Network and other allied organizations, that's how we've been able to survive this. We consider ourselves a trans feminist organization, yet we don't get the support from the so-called feminist groups, right? Whenever this order came out, these feminist groups said nothing about like the violence that we were going through. So it was really sad for us to see that our feminine sisters were not supporting our our cause and that they only wanted us to join their women's march, right, once a year. And so and then you know, in November when it was like Trans Day of Remembrance, and they would go and they give these speeches where like without trans women there's no feminism, but then forget about us the rest of the year, right? So um again, right, like imagine the level of violence that we were already in, and the mayor, she knew this was going on. So what she did was she created a hotline to report the police abuse. So when she created this order, she knew that it was going to lead to increased police violence. And so she went ahead and created this hotline to report police violence, right? So that's how ridiculous this landscape is. And so it's there's we would get calls like 3, 4, 5 times a day from these um, from folks calling in with these claims. Even just in the 15 days where this order was on, we are actually successful in doing away with it, but we got so many different claims, right? Um, and it wasn't just the police, it was like the people working at the grocery stores, at the restaurant, saying like, you can't come in today because you're not a woman, because you're not a man, etc. So they had to go to like to their doctors to like be able to get notes to get stores to sell them food, right? And so again, without this gender order and without the pandemic, police was like already um, you know, having this horrible harassment and violence. You know, now this exacerbated, right? um, they're usually like we see a response from the trans community, from the organizations, from leaders, right? We are the ones that take in these cases and kind of like create and turn ourselves into a support group for each other, right? To let each other know that we can be each other's safety, create different processes and systems to address when our sisters are facing violence and are seeing this in their communities.
Thank you. So there's a couple of questions and comments, the Mariela, in the chat. So the first one is from German Gerardo, and they're saying that thank you all for speaking about the experiences and situations in Colombia with trans folks and how they are resisting. In this transnational effort to share and converse, what does the Red Trans need or would like support in from this end of the world? What art activism can we collaborate in to bring light to this? In an abolitionist stance, what laws or legislations can be worked on to decriminalize trans folks? That's a whole webinar by itself.
Esa pregunta la respondo.
Yeah, I'll take that question. Well, listen, I think there's a lot of things that we need, right? Because everything's a challenge here. We it's not really easy. So every every single tiny success, even if it's like minuscule, it's a great success for us. So we were, you know, just to share an anecdote. Last time we put on our Facebook page, we put a little like a screenshot of a meeting that we had um, with when we talked about how to defund the police, how to create alternatives to police, and all of that. Talking about the history of violence from police, like the history of murder and factory community. So through that, we were able to connect to the research that we were doing. Um, there's in like are the folks that are in the barrio, in the neighborhood, like we start recognizing them, right? Even in their plain clothes. And so there was one of them that like followed us on Facebook and started blowing up our WhatsApp, like, y'all are just generalizing. Why are you putting this out there? And so we know that we're being watched by them, right? They are targeting us. They have us identified, and so that increases the danger we face, right? It's similar to this history of social leaders being assassinated by the state. So that becomes a huge challenge to do our work, and I feel like the the issue of funding, right? Um, a lot of people think that because we're a grassroots organization, because we're right, like we're led by sex workers, etc. A lot of people think that because of that, we aren't capable to deal with budgeting and with fundraising and with money, and so nobody, people won't fund us. And so there's these other LGBTQ organizations that have, folks that are super privileged, that are professionals, right? Um, they get tons of funds and donations, um, but organizations that are grassroots, like ours, right, led by sex workers, we don't get those funds or donations, right? Um, this whole issue of funding and and like the issue again that like the life expectancy of trans folks in Latin America is could be anywhere from like 35 to as low as 28, right, for a trans woman, right? These things like just compound to create a lot of issues for us, right? Not to mention the fact that we're undergoing this armed conflict. Um, this I think that the context and the landscape um, can be really disheartening, right? Especially just not to mention the individual situations that we have to deal with day by day. And so, yes, like it is really powerful work. And now we're starting to see it replicated in other regions, right? So if it has been difficult for us in the capital city, imagine how difficult it's going to be for folks trying to replicate this work in the outskirts of the city or like in the rural areas where there's not as much of that sort of spatial or structural or territorial access, right, that we might have here, right? And so a lot of the support that we need and want is, is just folks really sharing and visibilizing the work we do with the art projects, with the mutual support. Um, something I mentioned at the beginning, right? This is something that we think that art is a universal language that can really help us have these conversations, and so we can cross language barriers, cultural barriers, and be able to communicate with this language of art, right? And at the same time, highlight what's going on in our daily lives and experiences and how we see life, right?
Thank you. And then Coco has also posted a couple links as well. So Mariela, just it's 7:57, so I just want to flag time and a quick comment also from Jennifer that how do you combat anti-trans feminists in your communities? It is painful to see this in our community on the border, especially around the feminicidios. I'm so sorry, which affect trans women disproportionately too. Thank you for all your work and that you do. So thank you. So I'm going to pass it on to you, Mariela.
Yeah, I don't know. No sé si hay tiempo para contestar esa pregunta.
I don't know if we have time to answer that last question. Yeah, they touched a bit on the work of they're doing and how they also face anti-trans feminism, right? But there's another question, and again, we might not be able to answer it. We're seeing an opening where we can now talk about abolition in a way that seems possible. How can we share this opening moment with our transnational movements and Amy answers, we need to articulate ourselves to generate these collective care networks that are transnational to be able to denounce the threats that our sisters are facing in Colombia and all over, right? A network that can um, work against the surveillance, the state surveillance that we face. So again, thank you everyone for participating in this gathering, this exchange. I hope that we can continue to to be in conversation. Daniela has just shared that we can also help them out by sharing um, the things that get published by the Trans Network. At the beginning of the meeting, Amy placed some links in the chat for some pages and some campaigns. Maybe we can copy them in the chat again so that folks can follow their work and support them. Again, anything that you'll need from us over here, right? Now that we have established this connection with y'all, we're really grateful to that you took this time. I know it's a lot later over there in Colombia, but we appreciate the time you took to share. I know there's a lot more questions, but hopefully we can continue having more of these events, more of these conversations. Again, thank you so much to everyone who participated. Uh, if just to close, I see folks sharing some events. We also have Chela wanted to share some local events in LA, and there's also an emergency collection for our trans and gender non-binary siblings who are in the Picota prison. You can take a so you can follow our you can message us in our Facebook page, but I can also share a PayPal link that y'all could use to donate to our sisters who are imprisoned right now, who are incarcerated. So yeah, we see that that's a big risk right now is it's a contagion issue with COVID, right? For folks who are incarcerated. So yeah, yes, please, if you can share the PayPal link, that would be great. We'll do the work to share this link out to folks. And again, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for creating the space. It's really incredible to know that in all different parts of the world, we're working and fighting and creating change to abolish and defund the police. I think that's wonderful. Again, we really need justice because there's so much violence, right? We need justice, memory, and reparations. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Daniela and everyone.
Chela had,
Matilde, Alvaro.
Chela, do you have a
And
comment?
Chela?
Yes. So this Saturday at 7:15 on Facebook and I think Zoom, but I know it's primarily on Facebook. There's going to be there's this art thing that happens every year. It's called Kanta, and it's put on by a brown queer radical ass person. And my band, for those that don't know, I'm in a band. I'm in a punk band. And we are performing at this. It is online. It's going to be virtual. So you can join from wherever. If folks, I'll send it out to Mariela and other folks so that they can send out the flyer if anyone wants to join and see my band and see other performances. I know there's going to be a Latina drag show, and I know there's going to be another a DJ DJing. So it's going to be a real awesome event. It's this Saturday at 7:15 Los Angeles time. So I don't know the terms of that, but I will definitely send it out to folks and send it out to your networks.
Thank you, Chela. Gracias a todos. Gracias por estar con nosotros.
Adios.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. See you next Tuesday, 6
Adios.
o'clock.
Adios. Adios, baby.
Ciao. Love and power. See you.
That worked out good, Ollie. Oh. Wait, you're not a... You are
Can
a
you
host.
make me host?
Yeah. So sorry.
I'm the host.
I didn't
host
quite read
now?
that. There you go. Of course. There you
Thank
go.
you.
Of course.
Just
All right.
so I can.
Cool. Well,
And
excellent. Well, thank you all very much. This was beautiful. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Jose. This was such an honor. Much really appreciated. Very honored. Thank you.
Gracias a la coalición, gracias a familia, gracias a todos. Esperemos volvernos a ver.
thank you to the coalition. Thank you, familia. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Yes, and thank you to both Ali and Jose. You guys were brilliant. Not, didn't skip anything. Thank you.
Y gracias.
Have a good night.
Ya apagué la interpretación, pero bueno, muchísimas gracias. Nos vemos. Muchísimas gracias.
Bye-bye.